late 1980s, sober Deadheads were gathering under yellow balloons at set break, holding recovery meetings named after Wharf Rat, while Jerry Garcia, the man singing "I'll Get Up and Fly Away," was already years into heroin addiction. I'll get up and fly away. That's the whole problem with this song, and it's why you're still thinking about it. Wharf Rat is not a redemption story. I know it sounds like one. The bridge builds, Garcia's voice climbs, there's a vow, I'll get a new start, live the life I should. But the music underneath that vow never resolves. The chords hang, the promise hangs. And by the last decade of the band's existence, the voice delivering that promise belonged to a man whose own recovery kept collapsing. So the question isn't what Wharf Rat means. Every deadhead over the age of 30 can tell you what it means. The question is why it became sacred. And the answer is that it refused to give you what it promised. Garcia himself understood the instability baked into the song. He said the lyric operates on a structural trick most listeners never consciously identify. In Wharf Rat, you don't know if you're the guy who's hearing the story or the guy who's telling it. It really doesn't matter in the long run. Think about that for a second. The narrator walks along the docks and meets August West, this broken-down wino, a poor lost soul who'd been kicked around by fate and circumstance, as Blair Jackson wrote in Garcia, and American life. August tells his story, makes his vow, insists Pearlie Baker has been true to him, and then the narrator walks away and starts insisting his own girl has been faithful. The lyric mirrors itself. August's assurance becomes the narrator's assurance, and assurance in this song is doing the work that proof would normally do. Robert Hunter saw something different in it, something stranger. He described Wharf Rat as a description of one of the low muses, and yet the Wharf Rat evokes one of the other muses, which is Pearlie Blue. That's Hunter being Hunter, talking about the song like it's an entity, not a composition, but it tells you something about the emotional territory. This isn't a story about a drunk on the waterfront. It's a song about the gap between what you are and what you believe you could become. Now, musically, this matters. David Dodd, who's probably spent more time inside dead lyrics than anyone alive, makes a claim about Wharf Rat that gets as close to proving this as anything can. He says the repeated suspended A chords in the song beg for resolution that will never be granted. That's not a metaphor. That's harmony. A suspended chord is literally a delayed arrival. The note that would make you feel home is held back, replaced by something that leans toward home but doesn't get there. And in Wharf Rat, that suspension isn't a passing ornament. It's the song's nervous system. The droning A chord runs through it, like what Jackson called a nervous, jagged pulse. So when Garcia hits the bridge and the dynamics lift and the room goes quiet and then erupts, when it feels like redemption, the harmony is still saying, not yet. Maybe never. Dodd also called the song partially aimed at the Deadheads. Not at audiences in general, at the community specifically, at people he knew were vulnerable to exactly the cycle August West describes. The song debuted on February 18, 1971, at the Capitol Theater in Port Chester. Same set as Loser. And from the very beginning, the band didn't treat it like a standalone ballad. They embedded it inside a Dark Star suite, which tells you they understood it as improvisation material, not a set piece. It was a song you fell into, not one that wrapped up the night in a bow. The only version that ever made it to an official album was a live take from the Fillmore East on April 26, 1971. Tickets were $4.50, later released on Skull and Roses with a Merl Saunders organ overdub grafted on after the fact. The song never got a real studio treatment. That matters, because it means Wharf Rat was always defined by what happened to it live. The authority was in the room, not on a master tape. And what happened live, over 24 years, is that the band gradually moved Wharf Rat into one very specific slot in the show. Jackson noticed it. Garcia usually placed Wharf Rat deep in the heart of the second set. A little flash of despair before Bob Weir would send everyone home with some cheery up-tempo rock and roll song. By the late 1970s, the placement had solidified further. The song was landing after drums in space. That long stretch of percussive abstraction where the band dissolves form entirely. So the audience would spend 15-20 minutes in pure sound. No melody, no lyrics, no recognizable song. And then Garcia would bring them back with this. A human voice, a vow, a man on the docks promising to fly away. David Lemieux, the Dead's archivist, described what happened in those moments. The band would take a quiet ballad and turn it into this thing that now has the power to blow the roof off the place. He used Wharf Rat as his specific example, a confession song becoming a detonation, and it could do that precisely because of where it sat in the set. After the dissolution, the return to language hits like oxygen. You can hear this mechanism operating as early as 1974. On July 31st at Dillon Stadium in Hartford, sold out, 20,000 people, the band built a long improvised maze through Truckin' and several thematic jams before landing in Wharf Rat. The song wasn't closure, it was a clearing in the forest. 6 weeks later, at Alexandra Palace in London, they ran Eyes of the World straight into Wharf Rat. Ned Logan, who was there, described the audience as floating. And afterward, you can hear Garcia laughing. The song had done its work. It pulled the room back from abstraction into human-scale feeling, and then the show moved on. That pattern, once you see it, is everywhere across 24 years of Setlists. The vow never gets the last word. But the song's power didn't just come from setlist physics, it came from biography. By late 1977, Persian Heroin had entered the Dead's world. Rock Scully described it arriving through a Swami friend of Garcia's, an ashram guy whose devotee brought it back from Iran. At first, nobody called it heroin. They called it Persian opium. Of course, it turned out to not really be opium, which is somewhat benign at all. Alan Trist admitted later, but a form of processed heroin. Scully was blunt about the method. Chasing the dragon, they called it, smoking it off tinfoil. Garcia took to it immediately. The drug gave him single-purpose intensity during the mixing sessions for Cats Under the Stars. He could focus for 20 hours straight. And then it stopped being a tool and started being a need. For a while, it didn't seem to matter. Garcia was productive through the late 70s. The music was strong, but by the mid-80s, the costs were visible to anyone paying attention. And then, in July 1986, Garcia collapsed into a diabetic coma. He was down for 5 days. When he came out of it, he couldn't walk. Couldn't remember how music worked. Merl Saunders, the same guy who'd overdubbed organ on that Fillmore Wharf Rat 15 years earlier, sat with Garcia at a piano, going over chord changes like a teacher with a student until muscle memory kicked back in. Bill Kreutzmann called it miraculously expeditious. Garcia was back on stage with the Jerry Garcia Band by October, and on December 15, 1986, the Grateful Dead played a comeback show at the Oakland Coliseum for 14,000 people. They opened with Touch of Grey. The crowd lost its mind at I Will Survive. But Jackson noticed something subtler happening with the other songs that night. Certain lyrics suddenly took on new meanings in light of Garcia's fall and resurrection, he wrote. And of all the songs that shifted, Wharf Rat shifted the most. Jackson put it precisely. The bridge of Wharf Rat, which had sometimes seemed eerily ironic during Garcia's worst Junky days, now sounded hopeful and sincere. Read that again. Eerily ironic during the Junky days. Hopeful and sincere after the comeback. The same words, I'll get a new start, live the life I should, meaning completely different things depending on when the man singing them had last been near death. That is what makes a song sacred, not the lyrics, the distance between the lyrics and the life. And Garcia knew it. He said after the coma gave me that little midlife kick you need sometimes. It got me out of the doldrums. It got my attention. Let me put it that way. I've always been a fan of new beginnings. So for a few years, the bridge of Wharf Rat sounded like it might actually be true. Garcia played with more verve than he had since the late 70s. He made eye contact with the band. He smiled. He moved. And every time that bridge landed in the second set, I'll get back on my feet someday, the good Lord willing, it felt less like fiction and more like testimony. Then it collapsed again. After Brent Mydland died of a speedball overdose in July 1990, Garcia quietly started using Persian again. By the summer 1991 tour, it was obvious to the inner circle. His playing was still sharp. That was the cruel thing about Garcia and drugs. He could still perform, but offstage he reverted to what Jackson called his old junkie posture. When the band tried to intervene, Garcia lashed out, reportedly telling them that playing with the Dead wasn't fun for him anymore. Garcia went through outpatient methadone. He relapsed. He went through it again. Barbara Meyer, his girlfriend in 1993, watched it happen in real time. The open, loving man turning cold and withdrawn once the heroin took hold. What Garcia got out of heroin, she said when it was over, was oblivion. If you were at a show in those years, you know what came next. Space dissolves. The lights shift. Garcia steps to the mic, and you hear that droning accord, and the room goes still. 20,000 people holding their breath because they know what song this is. And when he gets to the bridge, his voice is thinner than it used to be, rougher, and he's leaning into the words like they cost him something. I'll get a new start. You can hear the effort. You can hear what the effort is costing, and the room rises with him anyway, because what else are you going to do? The man is up there trying. Now think about what Wharf Rat sounds like in 1993. In 1994, the bridge hasn't changed, I'll get a new start. But the voice has. The body has. The room knows everyone in that audience has been through this cycle with Garcia before. The coma, the comeback, the relapse, the vow, the relapse again. Wharf Rat isn't a character study anymore. It's a public reckoning that repeats every time the band drops it after space, and the fact that it never closes the show. It always yields to something else, not Fade Away or Sugar Magnolia or whatever Weir picks to send them home means the vow is structurally incomplete. The song makes a promise. The set list won't let it keep it, and that is exactly what made it useful to the people who needed it most. Sometime in the 1980s, the exact founding date is imprecise and anyone who tells you otherwise is guessing, a community of sober deadheads started organizing around a simple idea. You could go to dead shows without drugs, and you didn't have to do it alone. They called themselves the Wharf Rats. They met at set break under yellow balloons. Hunter knew about them and approved. There's a group of deadheads who have a yellow balloon they meet under at the shows, and they're the drug-free deadheads. They invite people to come gather around there. I like that. That's nice. Their own materials are blunter. We are concert goers who have chosen to live drug and alcohol free. Their newsletter states, our primary purpose is to make ourselves available to anyone who feels we may have something they want. They weren't AA, they weren't NA. They explicitly said so. They were deadheads helping deadheads in a setting where every trigger you could imagine was 20 feet away. Some nights the circle was 2 people. Some nights it was 150. Either way, you showed up. The lot is right there. The hallways smell like everything you quit, and you're standing under a yellow balloon with strangers because a song about a drunk on the waterfront told you something nobody else would, that you don't have to be fixed. You just have to be here tonight. And the name came from the song, not from August West, the character, from August West, the condition, the promise of recovery that can be spoken but never guaranteed. That's what the yellow balloon meant. That's what Meet at the Yellow Balloons at Set Break meant. Same place, same time, same yellow balloon every show, and that ritual mapped directly onto what the song does every night. Voice a hope, withhold its completion, come back and voice it again. Garcia never made it. He died on August 9th, 1995, at a treatment center. He was 53. His last Wharf Rat had been 6 weeks earlier, on June 25th at RFK Stadium in Washington. Drums, space, Wharf Rat, then Not Fade Away, The Vow, then the continuation, never the ending. The final performance locked something into place that had been building for years. When Garcia sang, I'll get up and fly away at RFK, those words couldn't be heard as fiction anymore. The room had too much history with them. Attendees on the Dead.net archive still describe that Wharf Rat as cosmic. They say Garcia's vocals still give me chills. These are people who'd heard the song hundreds of times. What moved them wasn't the melody, it was the knowledge that the singer meant it and couldn't do it, and sang it anyway. That's why a critic can call Wharf Rat a holy squall of redemptive sound, and Dodd can say the Chords beg for resolution that will never be granted, and both of them can be right. The song sounds like redemption. It lifts like redemption. The room rises with it, but the harmony won't close. The set list won't let it be the last word, and the man who sang it for 24 years proved in his own body that the vow was conditional. Nearly 400 performances. Same words every time. And every time, the distance between the promise and the reality was a little different, a little wider, a little more desperate, a little more sacred. That's the thing about Wharf Rat that the standard explainer videos miss. It didn't become sacred because Deadheads decided to treat it that way. It became sacred because it told the truth about what recovery actually looks like. Not a destination, but a vow you keep making because the alternative is silence. And Garcia, who hated repeating himself, who said he hated to play anything the same twice, ever, kept coming back to those same words in that same slot, night after night, year after year. Not because he'd found redemption, because he hadn't, and the room heard both.